So people look at you and they see Zak May Today. Man, that guy's got his life together. It's so easy for him. He's got his wife and now little Zane, and they're building their family. That's what I love about this conversation we're having one-on-one. It hasn't always been that easy. What is it like to grow up with a parent as an addict?
It really helped create the person that I am today. Sort of this dynamic of I was shaped and taught to remove emotion from any circumstance and kind of disassociate so that I could become what I wanted to become, so that my family could be what I wanted it to be. I didn't have any grace or any mercy for myself. When I would try to correct out of self-sabotage, I started running to the wrong things. Drugs, alcohol, women, to really try to fill this hole or this need. If you were to look at me from the outside perspective, best shape of my life physically, but internally, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, by far the worst state of being. I got the phone call from my infectious disease doctor instantly. I was declared stage 4 cancer, Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Death is like right in front of you.
Yeah, as real as it gets,
Just as a parent, like one of my kids sat down, that'd be so hard. And I'm just thinking what your parents were experiencing, what you're experiencing. I mean, this is no joke.
Walked out on the patio and sat in silence for a little bit. Then I was just like, all right, God, if you heal me, the rest of my life is yours. We go back, get that 2.5-month PET scan, and cancer was gone. Absolutely a miracle.
Hey, this is Mark from One-on-One, and I'm sitting here with Zak May. Zak, tell us a little bit about your history with movies. That's where I got to start.
Oh, yeah?
I love movies, and I love stories, which really brings us here today is we're going to be telling your story. It's kind of like, it's a movie of your life. And we're going to unfold who Zak May is to encourage other people, because that's what I think stories do so well, is when I hear a story of somebody's life, even if it's a small portion that's impacted mine, man, it just helps me along the journey. So I got to ask, like, what's your favorite movie?
Based off my history of movies, I was an athlete growing up, so I didn't spend a whole lot of time inside watching films. But a movie that, for whatever reason, grabbed a hold of my heart, and the first thing I thought of is a movie called Lawless. Have you ever seen that?
Maybe.
It's all about the moonshine times, and which gives you a little insight where I've been. But
okay, now we're going.
The moonshine times where actually the creator of the truck Ford started using moonshine as gasoline. But it's it's based off the southern or western world, and obviously way back when. And so there's a lot of outlaw action in there, and it's just a really intense story. And I think there's like a brotherhood dynamic to it that, for whatever reason, grabbed a hold of my attention and my heart. So it's a great movie.
Note to self: use moonshine if I run out of gas.
Yeah, always just keep it in your car.
Always keep it in my car. All right, I'm going to do that.
That's funny.
Wow. So if you had somebody play your part, if we made a movie of Zak May, who would play your part? Who would you hire? Anybody. I mean,
Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan Reynolds. I love it. Okay.
Nice, dark, dry humor.
Okay.
Doesn't miss a moment to be sarcastic. Yeah.
I could see it.
Yeah.
Ryan, if you're out there, we have a part for you. Call me. I want to start, I guess, with who Zak May is today. I think that's a great way to start a movie always, is the introduction is, who are you? And tell us a little bit about your life, and even the most recent, like, big milestones. What have been the big rocks for you?
Yeah.
For Zak May?
Yeah, so I'm currently 28 years old. And
28.
I've been saved for about 5 years at this point in my life. Okay. And it's been quite the journey the last 5 years, but the most recent milestones would be that I'm now a father.
What?
And obviously before that milestone, I became a husband as well. So I'm uncle, I'm son, I'm brother. And I would say that's a lot of what really defines me now. And then I'm also in a full-time role at 2911 Church as a connections coordinator. So a lot of what I do surrounds family, church, and definitely my home life.
What would you say is Zak May's purpose? Like, what's your purpose in life?
I love that question because very early on, In our relationship, I remember one of the things that you shared with me is we can always overcomplicate purpose. And
for sure.
obviously, I got to bring scripture into it, but Acts 20:24, Paul's writing and he says, I consider my life worth nothing unless if I'm sharing the good news of the gospel. And I think that really defined purpose for me, not in the sense of like just from a teaching standpoint, but like understanding that my life preaches to people. And so I would say, as of right now, my main purpose in life is to just represent all that God's done in my life and help people to see him.
That's a good purpose to have.
Yeah.
And it hits every area of your life, from who you are, not only at the church, not only out in the marketplace, but who you are at home. You know, does your wife see it in you? And will your little boy, does he see it in you as well? I hope so. Yeah. Now we know your little boy, his name is?
Zayn.
How old is he?
He is, Saturday will be 11 months.
What? Almost a year?
It's crazy. It's almost
We've got a picture of Zayn that we're going to put in the credits later. So make sure you take a look at that, because that kid is cute, and he's definitely a handful. The kid's running everywhere.
I love it.
He's almost as tall as me already, which isn't very challenging or difficult. So people look at you and they see Zak May Today. You know, I think in this age of scrolling and comparing, it's easy to go, man, that guy's got his life together. It's so easy for him. He's got his wife and now little Zayn, and they're building their family. He gets to do ministry, or whatever his goals are, he's completing them. And I'm just stuck here looking at him thinking, man, I wish my life was that easy. And that's what I love about this conversation we're having one-on-one. It hasn't always been that easy. No. And sometimes we learn from one another as we hear the story to give us strength. So let's go back a little bit and talk about the Zak May before. I met you, before Eileen met you. What was Zak May like growing up? Where did you grow up, and what kind of, home environment did you have?
Yeah, our home environment was great. Circumstantially, it was not the best. But I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and born and raised there. Moved out to Arizona when I was 18. But like I said, home life was great. Circumstantially was not. And one of my earliest childhood memories really is my older sister. So I'm the youngest of three. Okay. My parents had 3 in 3 years, pretty much. My sister was born in 93, brother in 95. I was born in 96.
Okay, they were on a calendar.
Yeah, they were moving. They were busy. But from that circumstance, my earliest childhood memory was my oldest sister gathering my brother and I, getting us into a closet and hiding, really. And obviously, I was maybe 2 or 3 years old. But I just remember peeking through the cracks of the closet and seeing red and blue flashing lights and not really knowing what was going on. But as you grow up, you learn some things. Yeah. And at that time, my mom was actually outside rolling somebody in our driveway. And
your mom is a tough chick.
She is.
I can see that.
For sure. Yeah. So, but as I learned during that season, she was struggling with a drug addiction, and I mean they were young, only knew each other for 4 months before they got married, and so by the time they had the 3 kids, they were 22 and 25 years old, and so it was a lot that transpired over those 3 years for them, and kind of set them on a tough path. And so in a lot of ways, growing up, I felt like I was growing up with my parents, as they were discovering life, so were we. Wow. We got exposed to some stuff at an early age, I would say, just by the environment we were in. And so, and Albuquerque is not, the kindest of places. So schools and stuff like that were always rough. I remember the elementary school I went to was across the street from Section 8 housing. And so very cultured at a young age. Yeah.
You saw a lot.
You saw a lot, experienced a lot, and got to be a part of a lot of beautiful things. So it wasn't all bad, because no matter our circumstances, if there was ever one thing that we knew in our house, it was that we were loved, and that my parents would go to whatever length to take care of us and make sure that we were provided for. And so that's always been at the core of who I am, is just knowing that I'm loved and cherished by my parents, regardless of what else is going on in life. And so I would say that's a lot of what shaped me in this life, For sure.
So growing up, here's a question. Growing up with a parent that has an addiction, that's a different kind of a household. And some of our listeners or those that are watching might identify. I mean, I grew up in a house. My mom was addicted to coffee, like big time. Okay, yeah. It was another level.
She was.
She drank a cup of coffee until she passed away at 94. But like, we take her in and out in the middle of summer here in Arizona. It's hot, and she'd have a hot cup of coffee. I mean, coffee. I couldn't get her to drink water, but coffee I could get her to drink. So it's just different. And I think sometimes we don't always understand what the lens was. Yeah. So what was your lens? What did you see? What is it like to grow up with a parent as an addict?
I mean, it really wasn't until I grew up and matured that I started to recognize like certain things just aren't actually normal.
Yeah.
Because when you get shaped by your environment, I mean, when you get outside of that environment, you start to really evaluate and see like, wait, that actually shouldn't have happened, or those are experiences that I shouldn't have had at that age or whatever. And so I think perspective-wise, honestly, I feel like specifically more towards my mom, I would grow up a little less compassionate because I didn't understand circumstantially where she was at or where her mindset was at. And so because she is a tough chick, I would say I had a little less compassion because I just didn't understand fully where she was at. I just knew that there was messes made, and she wasn't always to blame, no doubt. Like, she was doing the best with what she could do and what she was capable of. And she's an amazing mom.
Oh, she rocks.
She is great. So
amazing. She has amazing testimony.
Yes.
And she is an incredible leader today.
Yeah.
Your entire family, the redemption, which is a part of your story, so I won't get ahead.
Yeah.
But just, I mean, you got to know the journey that got them there.
Yeah. And so it's hard to explain without like making it sound like it was all bad, you know, because there was so much beauty in it, and it really helped create the person that I am today. So I couldn't imagine not having the experiences and the type of mom that I had, because again, her heart and her love for her babies. Yeah. I mean, I'm 6'4" and she's 5'5", and if she could still hold me on her lap, she would, you know, like that's her kind of love and care. Yeah. But just from an immature, ignorant side of me, I just never understood certain dynamics. But have learned through maturing and becoming an adult myself and understanding what responsibilities look like and the pressures of life, and even certain decisions that I've made in my own addictions and addictive behaviors that help me to understand and have compassion now like I never have before.
Do you think that you got to a point in your life where you started to go, I don't want to live like that anymore. I don't want to live like maybe what I see in mom or dad? And how did that change you? What age was that?
I mean, again, it all seemed a little normal, but I knew that I wanted more. And I think the hard part for me growing up, majority of my life, I just felt like the backbone a little bit, because like I was the youngest, so I was the saving grace to the family. Like it kind of felt like my family had a dynamic of, if Zach can do it, anybody can do it. And so I felt like I was always pushed to the front. Even though I was the youngest and looking up to them, trying to seek direction from them, it always seemed like Zach goes first. And I did. I mean, I took that off and went running. I experienced a lot of firsts for myself and my family. But I just feel like there was some sort of pressure growing up where, because I was an athlete, played multiple sports, my dad was always coach. And so I think that kind of shaped the dynamic of the home life and then what life away from home was like. And it was always sports. Sports was the first outlet for me, my first escape. And so we always had good memories with dad because we were always experiencing stuff on the field. My mom was always in the stands supporting, of course, but then we would go home and we would have to deal with consequences or circumstances at home. And so, and by no means was my dad perfect, you know, which we'll talk about at some point, I'm sure. But it just created this dynamic where I would escape in sports and I'd come home and just not love what was happening at home. And in sports, I was pretty successful. I would, in my humble opinion, say I was really good at playing.
Pride right there. What sport? Can you tell us what sports?
So I played baseball, football, and basketball growing up. So there was never an off season for me.
You were on 24/7.
Yeah, which was good.
365, right?
And so many of my coaches would speak into me and say, Zach, you can literally be whoever or whatever you want to be. Like, you're so amazing at this, you're so amazing at that. And even though that's like an encouragement, when I would look around my household, when I'd look around my friend groups, when I'd look around at other people's parents, it always just seemed like nobody was ever who they wanted to be. And it put this sense of doubt, but also confusion in me of, if you say I can be who I want to be, then why aren't you who you said that you wanted to be? And it created this level of self-sabotage in my life, but also put this really unhealthy pressure of performance and just being validated by performance and really making that part of my identity. That's really a foundation of who I am today, because I'm still fighting the self-sabotage. I'm still a workaholic. I still can't do enough to perform enough for what I think is worthy. A lot of the times I feel like stuff that's done for me is never enough. And so I just struggle with this whole concept of achievement and also being okay with where I'm at.
I think a lot of us do. I think a lot of us struggle with that, Zach. I just love how honest you always are about it. And self-sabotage, I think, in our world today is an easy way to, you try to utilize those instincts that maybe you learned as a child or you learned in sports to motivate yourself as an adult. And it just never really works that well, right? Because you're slamming yourself down, hoping to lift yourself up. Can you give me an example or maybe a situation or an incident that you experienced where self-sabotage really hurt you as maybe a young athlete or a young person, junior high, high school?
Yeah, so something that's very problematic in the self-sabotage experience, and especially being an athlete, I was always taught that emotions lead to a loss, per se. So I was always taught to remove emotions from the game because when you're emotional, it slows you down or it distracts you from moving forward or the next pitch mentality in baseball, right? So that really was something that I didn't only apply to sports, but I applied to life. And so this is where, having that conversation about my mom, I lacked compassion, but it was sort of this dynamic of I was shaped and taught to remove emotion from any circumstance and kind of disassociate so that I could win, right? So that I could become what I wanted to become, so that my family could be what I wanted it to be. And so I would say anytime I was emotional, it's very easy for me to beat myself up for it. Like, why are you crying? And not to get ahead, but there was a long period of time after I experienced the cancer diagnosis and everything where I literally told myself, you're not allowed to cry about this. And instead of being broken, it was heart at heart, put your head down, figure it out, move forward, make a way, win, right? Win the battle. So I would say
finish strong.
Yeah. I would say a lot of self-sabotage stems from removing emotions and just wanting to correct.
Do you think that correcting yourself was healthy, or was correcting yourself something that actually then hurt you?
Definitely something that hurt me. I didn't have any grace or any mercy for myself. And so when I would try to correct out of self-sabotage, I started running to the wrong things. Because there's a certain point where you just can't not remove emotion, right? Like you're going to feel something no matter what. And so eventually I started to really lean into some drugs, alcohol, women, sex, pornography, all these different things to really try to fill this hole or this need, or find a way to like numb out to try to then not feel the emotion beyond the level of what I couldn't do on my own. And so I would say that was a big part of the journey for me of discovering truth and how to really feel that hole. But yeah, definitely made some poor decisions because I couldn't escape myself.
What was one of your lowest points, you would say, and what did that look like?
One of my lowest points was definitely in San Francisco when I was playing Division II baseball. I was away from family, and that was really the first time I was living away from home. Because even when we moved to Arizona, my dad and my brother moved at the same time, so I was still within a household of family.
So how old were you at this time, would you say?
I was 20.
Okay.
Yeah, 20, 21. Yeah. About to turn 21 whenever I moved to San Francisco. And I had also gone through a pretty bad relationship and breakup. And so I was really out there and I felt alone. Yeah. And because I was alone and because I had poor habits, I just turned to those things. Yeah, and sure. I mean, San Francisco, if you know anything about it, it's not great. And I lived in the city. So I was in like the Tenderloin district and just not a great place to be. And pretty much had access to anything that I wanted to at that time. And again, through sports and through performance, it seemed like everything was great. But deep down, that was probably the darkest season of my life. And a lot of really bad things. But with that being said, it's like partying from 7 p.m. Until 2 a.m., waking up for practice at 6 a.m., like going to practice, coming home, hitting the weight room, going and smoking some weed, going to classes, repeat.
Repeat.
Yeah. Repeat. I really don't even know how I made it through that year. And that was also one of the first times I ever struggled with suicidal ideation at the same time. I remember sitting on it's downtown San Francisco, so they have fire escapes. So I'm sitting out on a fire escape just contemplating, like, do I really want to live? Wow. And the only thing that really saved me was we were nearing a break in the school year. I think it was Thanksgiving break or Christmas break or something. And the only thought I could have was I need to go back and see my family. Like, I just want to see my family one more time. There's got to be something more to this kind of conversation with myself. Yeah. And it was pretty dark.
Did you have anybody you could turn to at that point? Was there another guy on the team, or was there somebody you could call? You just felt so isolated, weren't talking to anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I had a roommate that was a teammate as well, but he had a girlfriend, and it was, I don't think my teammates at the time really knew what I was going through because I showed up in that state. So it's like, I guess this is who Zach is, you know? So, and I, again, remove emotion from everything. So even though I'm feeling something, I'm not going to let people know. And so I just shoulder it.
You got a good poker face. I will say that. You got a good poker face.
Learned it at an early age. Yeah. Wow. It's a big part of who I am. So I would say, I didn't really have anybody to turn to except for my family, because they were the only ones that really knew the circumstances at that time. So it was very beneficial to have that moment of clarity and wisdom to say, I got to see my family. Because really coming back home for that short break, getting to see them probably saved my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was that like? Is there something about that trip home? Was there a moment you had with somebody that just caused something inside of you to go, I want to live?
Just being around love and care again, I think reminded me of not only the fact that, like, I'm worthy of love, but, like, there are people that do love and care for me, was more than enough for me, because at that time, again, in San Francisco, it didn't seem like anybody cared, but they also didn't know how to care. But part of that is not opening up, you know, if nobody knows and they don't know. So just being surrounded by my family and just being reminded of how good it is to have family and to be loved. So
I know around the same time you started to experience some physical symptoms of not being well. And maybe, you know, when you get into the routine, you don't always take care of yourself. You kind of just get from
especially
Monday
that routine.
Yeah, that routine for sure. You aren't feeling it. You know what I'm saying? Can you share a little bit about that particular season and what was the outcome of that?
Yeah, it's It's kind of funny that you say that, because I jokingly say on this side of it now, people don't like that I joke about it, but I always say that I had so much fun in San Francisco that I got cancer. It's not great, but I really just didn't take care of myself. I was in such a poor routine and really doing only damaging things to my body. And so in terms of that whole experience, I started getting sick just from, I thought it was because I wasn't taking good enough care of myself. And all my teammates, of course, they didn't understand, because if you were to look at me from the outside perspective, I was in the best shape of my life physically, but internally, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, by far the worst state of being. And so with that whole dynamic, I would get sick for a week straight. And then I would be okay for 3 weeks. And so I really only missed one baseball series. And my coaches, they started to ask if I was doing like heavy drugs because of how off and on I was, how much I was missing classes and stuff.
Consistent, right?
But nobody knew how sick I was. But the time frame that I was sick, I would be down and out for like 16 hours. I would sleep like 16 hours straight. I would wake up, I'd have migraines, and when I'd close my eyes, I would see static screens, and it was just the worst headache I've ever had. I would have night sweats to the point where we could also have a photo of this at the end, but I'd have night sweats where literally my body would be outlined on my bed.
Wow.
Because I'd be sweating so hard. So I would wake up in the middle of the night and literally jump onto the floor and sleep on the floor for the rest of the night. I would shower, rinse myself, whatever, just to feel comfortable again. And then I would be throwing up, diarrhea, vomiting, everything, like the whole nine of it. And nobody could ever figure out what was wrong with me. And that whole season was about 11 months. So it was like November.
Wow, almost a year of feeling
10,
that way.
Yeah, 10 months. I think 11 doctors that I saw. I think I saw 7 of them in San Francisco. And then whenever I came home at the end of the school year in May, I wound up going to the Mayo Clinic and seeing like another 4.
So during this time, did you stay into the drug habit heavily still?
Oh yeah. I was still, and that's the crazy part. Really thinking back on it is my routine. Well, when I was sick for the week, I wouldn't go out. I wouldn't do anything. My teammates would always pop in and check on me, but I was always asleep. But once I felt good, I was right back to it.
Back at it.
Yeah, I didn't even think twice about it. And so it's just really ignorant, to be honest. Like looking back at it, it's comical to me, but yeah.
So 11, 12 months go by. What got you to this diagnosis?
Yeah, so something that's really interesting actually is it was actually April 19th of 2019. Okay. It was the senior day of my senior year, so the last series of our baseball season. And what had happened was because I was getting sick, they were actually going to do what's called a bone marrow aspiration, which is where they drill into your hip bone and they pull bone marrow out to test and see if there is something cancerous. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But for whatever reason on that day, my blood work came back completely normal, and they chose not to do the bone marrow aspiration. And so I wound up playing that night, had probably the best series of my life, which was kind of fun, kind of interesting.
Wow.
But then to move forward, it wasn't until August that I was officially diagnosed. And the way that I was diagnosed was by a bone marrow aspiration. And so there was a whole nother 4 or 5 month lapse that possibly could have been avoided. But I also don't think in the timing of that, if they would have done the bone marrow aspiration in San Francisco, that I would have had the same desperation that I had in the moment that I did. So it's pretty interesting how God works. But he knew I needed that extra 5 months to really become desperate for a real answer.
Man, the patience of God, right?
Yeah, seriously.
So you get this diagnosis. I know we have a picture that we're going to show.
Yeah.
That just always blows my mind. Like, what does it feel like to be on that side of a diagnosis of that nature?
Yeah. Well, so that experience was not easy.
I can't imagine, man.
So I wound up getting the bone marrow aspiration, and I got the phone call from my infectious disease doctor at the time, is who who was carrying it, my oncologist. They were working together, but he wound up calling me and he's like, I think we figured it out. And he's like, it looks like there's Hodgkin's lymphoma in your bone marrow. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, does that mean I have it? Like, or is it just like a sign that it's possible? And he's like, no, that's a fair way to say that you do have it. But then the next week, what we'll do is we'll take out a lymph node to confirm it. And so I received this phone call by myself. And I was sitting out on the patio, and it was like a Saturday, so my family's doing a family cleaning day. You know, everybody's just doing their own thing. And
so you're home here in Arizona at that point?
Yeah, with my family. My mom, my dad, and my brother were all home.
So you finished up in San Francisco?
Yeah.
Graduated?
I didn't graduate because I would have had a 5th year for my degree.
Okay.
But how God works, he knew I didn't need that degree. So school ends in May. I come home. My family sees me. Then the first time they see me sick, they're like, Zach, there's actually something wrong here. Like, again, for me, there's nothing wrong, right? I'm going to remove all emotion, or I guess wisdom too at that point. But then after 4 months of being home, 4 months of the Mayo Clinic, they finally did the bone marrow aspiration. This is what then they were able to confirm. It looks like there's Hodgkin's lymphoma. I received this phone call by myself sitting on the patio, and I'm kind of like trying to feel out the house a little bit and be like, do I sit everybody down? Like, what am I going to, like, how am I going to present this?
What do I say to them?
And so I just took a second out on the patio, and I'm just contemplating life, figuring out, it's just a crazy thought process that runs through your mind in that moment. But I eventually got the courage and was like, hey guys, I got a phone call from my doctor. Let's all sit down for a second. And
are your parents freaking out at this point?
They had no idea what to expect.
Really?
They were just like, oh, the doctor called. Let's,
Yeah.
And
We'll get some answers or whatever.
Yeah. So I just remember sitting across from my parents, and I was just like, so got the phone call, and bone marrow aspiration results came back, and it looks like I have Hodgkin's lymphoma. And they're like, and I'm like, well, that's a cancer. Because at that point we didn't know anything, right? So silence, right? The room just goes dead. Everybody's kind of just staring at each other, zoning out, just thinking of like all the options. Of course, we're trying to figure out what do we do?
Yeah.
And my mom was just like sitting there, and she looks at me and she's like, so what do you want to do? Like, is there anything you want to say? And I was like, honestly, I just feel like we need to pray about this. Mind you, we're not saved.
I was going to say, up to that point, there hasn't been a lot of prayer going on.
No, we hadn't been saved. My mom has been doing some Bible study on her own at that point, just trying to rediscover her faith, because she was still on her own journey, of course.
Right.
But for myself, I was far off from God, if my routine didn't explain that enough. My brother was far off from the Lord too, and my dad really wanted nothing to do with it at that point. And so the fact that that was my only answer, it was very supernatural, really, that came out of my mouth.
Man, Holy Spirit was already working.
Yeah, but I also knew that I couldn't do this on my own, and that's what I'm talking about whenever I was talking about the desperation that the Lord knew that I needed. And so I walked out onto the patio, and because that ended the conversation, we just need to pray about it. Okay. I was like, so I'm going to go on the patio. I walked out on the patio, and I sat down. We had this one raggedy old swing chair out there, and I just sat down and sat in silence for a little bit. And then I was just like, all right, God, if you're real, I need you to show me.
Yeah.
If you heal me, the rest of my life is yours. And that was my prayer. I just kept repeating that. I started standing up, saying it over and over and over again. And the more that I said it, and now that I look back, the more peace I was really starting to, every time I said it, I started to like release a little bit more, right? I'm crying, walking around on our patio, and I just said it one more time. I'm like, God, if you're real, I need you to show me. And for whatever reason, I decided to look up in that moment. And up until that point, it was like a normal, still night. And in that moment, when I looked up, there was this rushing wind. And I mean, you could just call it wind.
Yeah.
But I knew deep in my spirit that the Lord was like, I'm here. And it sounds like a movie. It sounds crazy, but that's really what my experience was. And in that moment, I gave my life to the Lord.
Oh, so cool.
And that was on August 19th, I believe. And then a few days later, on August 20th, we got what's called the PET scan. And that scan was to stage my cancer.
Okay.
And that's the photo that we'll have at the end. But it's pretty crazy when it comes to the PET scans. From what I was told, PET scans generally take 48 hours at a minimum to get the results. And so I get the PET scan. I'm leaving the Mayo Clinic again. And as soon as I walk out of the doors, my phone starts buzzing. I answer it. And it's my oncologist. And she said, Zach, I can't let you leave. I need you to come back up here.
Whoa.
She's like, I never get results this fast. I need you to come back up here.
You can't leave?
Yeah. She was like, she was dead serious.
So she's saying that because it was so bad?
Yeah. So then she gets me back.
Okay.
We sit down basically like this in her office, and she pulls up on the computer screen the scan. And when I saw it, I instantly just dropped my head. Because like at that point I knew I had cancer. Yeah. But to see the result of like what the cancer looked like in my body, right, it was pretty devastating.
Yeah. So you have this great moment with God.
Yeah.
You feel the wind of the Holy Spirit just beckon you in, like your heart's open, and you're like, okay. Did you at all at that point think, okay, this is it. God's healed me. He's going to heal me. Was coming to God part of the need to be healed, or was it a moment of Zach just going, God, I've been so far from you. I can't be that far from you anymore. I need you.
There was both in the same. I mean, you hear it in my prayer. It's so ignorant. Whenever I think back, if you heal me, the rest of my life is yours. To pray that prayer, it's like, it's contingent upon the what if, right? Yeah. Like the if you do this, then I'll do this. Yeah. But obviously, as I've grown in my faith, I understand that what the Lord has done is more than enough for me to surrender my life and follow Him. So definitely a part of that is, God, I know who I've been is not what you would want me to be or who you've created me to be. And if you heal me, the rest of my life is yours, right? So it's like both in the same. It was definitely a moment of desperation and definitely a reach for where my mindset spiritually was. Right. It was far-fetched. It was like, there's no way that God's real.
So did you find yourself wanting to give God like that almighty middle finger when you hear the diagnosis and the doctor sitting with you saying, we can't argue. I mean, this is what we're seeing on the scan.
Yeah. So being where I was at the time, we were trying to figure out if going like more natural was the route or chemo. And so while we're having our prayer time, right, because all we're doing is praying about this now as a family, it was, God, give us the wisdom on if we need to do treatment or if we can fight this naturally. And my oncologist was even willing. She's like, I'll give you if it's not bad, I'll give you 3 months to try to fight it yourself. We'll do another scan. We'll get another evaluation and see if what you're doing is working. And if that's the case, then we won't have to do chemo. But when we get this scan, and I don't even get to leave the Mayo Clinic, it brought a lot of peace and confirmation of this is what we have to do. Because the next thing that she said was, I can't let you leave. You need to come see this. When she showed it to me, we're like, okay, what do we do? And she said, I'm admitting you to the hospital tonight.
Right then?
Right then. Because she said, if you go home with the size of my spleen, she's like, even if you hit a speed bump wrong, you might die. Like this weekend. So she was not playing around when she said
death is like right in front of you.
Yeah. As real as it gets. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So I'm grateful again to come full circle with my mom. She's sitting right next to me in that moment, and she's the strongest woman I know. Some of the stuff she's endured and overcome, and I just couldn't have asked for anybody else to be next to me in that moment. Because, Rachel, she'll take a deep breath. okay, here we go, right?
Yeah.
Head on. So
I'm just thinking for a minute, just as a parent, like if one of my kids sat down, that'd be so hard. And I'm just thinking what your parents were experiencing, what you're experiencing. I mean, this is no joke. This isn't like hey, I've got a cold and I'm struggling through this. It's like death is right here. Don't leave the hospital. Don't even get in the car because that could literally take your life. If we hit a bump wrong, like it's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it was intense. So again, we sat in silence for a second. And then my mom said, well, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
She's like, I'm getting you a hospital bed. I'm admitting you right now, and we have to start treatment tonight. She's like, we have to get ahead of this. And so instantly, I was declared stage 4 cancer, Hodgkin's lymphoma. And yeah, we're facing it right then and there.
Stage 4. I mean, a lot of other stages you could be, but stage 4 is pretty imminent of what the future looks like.
Yeah.
So you did treatment? I'm assuming right away they start treatment. Did you change your habits? Because up to that point, I mean, Zak's coping habits probably weren't helping you.
Yeah. So initially, no.
No?
No.
Okay.
Alcohol, yes. But I still wanted to smoke weed. Obviously, there's a bunch of stuff out there about the medical side of marijuana. And so we, when you want to hang on to something, you find a way to hang on
tight.
to it. Yeah. So definitely held on to some things in that nature. Eventually, when I was healed, it all came back around.
Mm-hmm.
So the sanctification process is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But
God
in that moment,
I'll say it again, he's patient with us,
he's patient
right?
for sure. But yeah, initially I wasn't letting go of certain things.
So what was the next few weeks, months like?
Yeah, so the original plan, I guess, that we evaluated in that hospital bed and hospital room was they were expecting to do 6 months of treatment. And the way that my treatment was there's 2 6-hour treatments. One would be on Sunday, then the next would be on Monday. And then I'd come back in on Thursday and get like a white blood cell shot.
Okay.
And then I would return back on Sunday for a 6-hour treatment. And then I'd have that next Monday off. So every other week was 12 to 13 hours of treatment. And then every other week was like 6 to 8 hours, depending on the speed of the drip.
Yeah.
Really. So that was the initial plan. Then it was rough. And again, my mom, every single appointment, every single chemo treatment therapy, anytime I had anything, she was in the chair right next to me.
That's so cool.
And so I'm so grateful for that.
She's a tough chick on a lot of levels.
Yeah.
But sticking with you is one of them.
Yeah.
Most people don't maybe know that side of cancer. Like we know people with cancer and we held hands with people and sat with them. What's it like being on the side of the chair with the drip? What's that feel like? How could you help me understand?
Disgusting.
Yeah.
I actually have some like PTSD experience with it, like going to hospitals and some of the smells and stuff that's associated is not good for me. I just get like this sick feeling in my stomach. And ultimately you feel pretty helpless.
Yeah.
Because like, what else am I going to do? Yeah. Right. This is my only way to survive, it feels like. And so you kind of just try to ramp yourself up and just push through, get to the point of like, I can sit here for 6 hours and let this happen. Thankfully, the way that they do it through the port that I had right here in my chest, they just had like this little button looking thing that they would press in. It was a needle, and then they would attach it to the drip and really just kind of sit there and try to sleep through the 6 hours, because no matter what you did, at some point through the treatment, the chemo and the way that it works in your body, you would just be so exhausted physically by the end of it that you would want to sleep anyway. So the best way to pass the time was to sleep. Yeah.
Which you had good practice from college. You knew how to sleep.
Yeah, after being 6 hours for that long. Yeah. So, but to continue on, I mean, I was about 2.5 months into treatment. about middle of October. And that's whenever I walked into 2911 Church for the first time, October 19th.
I remember that.
October 19th of 2019.
Remember that night.
And,
we were meeting on Saturday nights at that point.
It was a Saturday night.
And watched you walk in with your brother, right?
Yep. My mom and my dad were attending 9 a.m. on Sundays.
Yeah. Your mom had attended a few weeks before for the first time, right?
Yeah.
That's another story.
Yeah.
That could take a lot of time, but how she even got there.
Yeah.
Woke up one Sunday morning, God said, go to church. She got on
Google, and the nearest church was 2911 Church. And
she got in the car, came halfway through the service, but knew something different when she left.
Yeah.
And I think that's what attracted her to bring you.
Yep. And a few weeks later, my brother and I were like, sure, we'll go, right?
Yeah.
I had this amazing salvation story on the patio, and I'm still reluctant to show up to church. And we finally show up, and they had heard that the Saturday night crowd was the young adult crowd, so they made it a point to get us there on a Saturday night. And kind of funny, we walked into a series on giving, of all things, right? So completely,
I love it.
Completely out of the blue.
Yeah.
Not really what you would expect for a first time experience at church. And I just
and
remember
you're tall. I knew you were in the room because I'm like, who's that tall kid back there?
Yeah, who's the new guy?
Yeah.
So that was great. I mean, we really enjoyed the connection in the community, but still standing in the back, like ready to go while my mom's yapping and meeting or introducing all of her friends, right?
Right.
Or new friends. And there's a guy by the name of Jake who had just passed by me, and I took note of him because obviously he's a pretty unique individual and easy to notice. And he came back to me and he said, "Hey, can I pray for you really quick?"
Yeah, some in between. So Jake and I were connecting that night, and I said, "Hey, have you seen this new kid named Zach? You can't miss him. He's tall. It's with his brother, Rachel's boys. We gotta love on those guys. I'd love to see them come back, but I think they're only gonna come back if they feel connected with. Can you go find him?"
Yeah.
So I sent him back out to find you in that extra lobby room that we had just recently built. We were in this little dilapidated mall, 5042, over here in the south part of Tempe. And it was just so cool that you got there. And then I just love how the kingdom of God works and how the body of Christ works. We worked together, and it wasn't anything that I could do, but I knew somebody in our community could reach out to you. And Jake comes back to you.
Yeah, and he didn't even like try to connect with me really, to be honest. Like he just came back and said, he just said, "Hey man, can I pray for you?" And that's literally it, just straight into prayer. And he grabbed both my hands and prayed. I don't even remember what he prayed because it wasn't like embellished or crazy or anything. It was just like, God, whatever he's going through, just be with him. Bless this man, like that sort of prayer, just very generic and just a point of connection and
point of care.
Yeah, point of care. And it meant a lot to me in that moment. Obviously, I'm standing there kind of with my eyes open still, like trying to figure out
I'm watching
what's
you
really
guys.
going on.
I'm talking to somebody in the other room, and I can tell you, the picture in my mind, I see out of the corner of my eye, Jake's with you and your brother are there.
Yep.
And I mean, I knew he was praying with you. I'm like, awesome.
Yeah. Don't know where he's at, but he's praying with him. So I was just really just receiving the prayer, not even fully realizing it. And 6 days later, we go back, get that 2.5 month PET scan, and cancer was gone.
Yeah. And we got a picture of that too.
Yeah.
Mind blowing. Yeah. Like gone. Like you went from body of darkness and you can see the cancer to clear.
Clear. Yeah. The only thing that you can really see in the scan, if you make it to the photos, is that my kidneys are darker, but it's because of all the white blood cells from all the white blood cell shots. And so everything else that you see is just clear. Wow. There's zero cancer in my body, and it's absolutely a miracle.
Zero cancer?
Yeah. Absolutely a miracle. And
so what are you thinking in this moment? Like you're sitting there and you just had been told by this doctor, you're at stage 4 not too long ago, and now you're sitting there and they're like, it's gone.
So initially it was kind of interesting, right? My doctor's like, yeah, so this is what you look like. And like me and my family kind of looked at each other. I look over at my mom, my dad's like sitting in another chair and he's looking at me. And we're like, is that good? Is that like what we're supposed to be seeing?
Yeah.
Because of what we saw previously, it was so covered that it's like, we don't even know what we're actually supposed to be seeing this time around. And she's like, yeah, no, this looks great for where you're supposed to be, kind of thing. And we're like, but it looks like there's like nothing there. And she's like, yeah, but we should continue treatment. And my dad's like, what do you mean continue treatment? It looks like there's nothing there. And he would tell you that he felt like he had to force her to say that I was in remission, because I think, honestly, that she was a little bit in disbelief of what she was seeing. Yeah. To the point where she was kind of like shocked at like this happened so fast. Yeah, 6 days from
the prayer to there, but I'm sure your body was.
We were 2.5 months in since the official first night of treatment, and she had said 6 months. So we're sitting here a third of the way into treatment, and she's sitting here looking at a clear cancer scan. Yeah. So I think part of her was just like a little shell shocked, like maybe we should continue, right? And that was her advice, was to continue. But my family and I, we were like, I've been healed, and so here I am 5 years later, and never went back.
Cancer-free, man. Cancer-free.
Yeah.
If you think back on that, Zach, just for a moment, like, so you're sitting there and you realize this. Again, a lot of people would say, it was just the chemo, bro. You know, how do you describe, how do you know that was God's hand? Because that can definitely be the argument. And here's the cool thing. God uses medicine and he uses his hand. Yeah. There's no doubt about that. I think what I find interesting is they gave you we're looking at 6 months, hoping that it'll even make a dent in this. And to me, the fact that it was so quick into the treatment, that God's hand and the treatment on your life, so powerful. To me, that's where I go, how could this not be a miracle?
Right. So there's a whole nother layer to my diagnosis, where I was actually diagnosed with stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma and HLH. And HLH is an autoimmune disorder that's in the bone marrow. And what would require healing of HLH is a full bone marrow transplant. Wow. And generally speaking, when it comes to those, they say 3 to 5 years after that, your body either regenerates or it doesn't, and you get sick again. And I didn't ever have to have that bone marrow transplant. So I would say that's another dynamic to this, of my healing wasn't just the stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma, but it was my entire being. And I would say, looking back at it now,
so awesome.
The fact that I know it's God is, I feel like I really haven't done anything different since that moment, except for obviously making decisions in my own will. But my entire life is just completely blessed in a completely different way than it ever was before, because of the transformation, not only in myself, but in my entire family, that God really did show up for me in that moment, but really for my entire family.
What's it like to wake up the next morning after you've heard that news? Open your eyes. I mean, what do you feel?
Doubt. Yeah, doubt. Because you start to question, is it really gone? Initially. But then, days go by and you're like, man, not doing treatment's nice. And maybe it really is gone. And then you really start to like have your mindset catch up with what God did spiritually. And from that point on, I mean, really, I still today, it's undoubtedly the hand of God that healed me, because based off of the statistics of me stopping treatment and stuff, it would be back by now. Yeah. And I just really believe that I've been made pure and clean from the inside out.
No doubt on that. And watching your life and the hand of God in your life, we can see it. So here's a tough question to ask you. What about the person that's sitting in the drip chair that isn't experiencing maybe the same results you did? What do you say to them?
Keep the faith. I would say keep the faith. I think for me, it was a place of desperation and the if you do this sort of dynamic. But I get reminded of in the book of Daniel, where we see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego get thrown into the fire, and they say, even if he doesn't save me from this fire, I will not bow down to you as our king. And it's that even if kind of faith that God will really honor in that season and in that time. And I know more than anything that it's a tough mental battle, but God sent the Holy Spirit for a reason. And that's something you spoke over me that really helped me transform through my addictions and behaviors, is that the Holy Spirit is strong enough. So I would say just press into the Holy Spirit.
So we go from where you were after to where you are today. Just give us a little bit of a highlight of the in-between, like what changed in your life and what brought you to the Zak we began with.
Yeah, everything changed. I no longer smoke weed. I don't struggle with alcohol abuse.
Yeah.
I don't struggle with pornography. My wife and I, originally in our early days of our relationship, we were not living the right way, but we wound up finding purity before getting married. And we saw the blessing of God in that sense. And I mean, purity was an issue to begin with in my life before even this relationship. And so that's just something I never understood until I got to know the heart of God. So we fought for purity. We made that right. And now I really see the blessing of God in our marriage and in our family. I mean, I look and see my whole family's a part of the church, serving in the church in a huge capacity. And so it's the sanctification process. I mean, it took time to really break down some of these walls, but the whole transformation of my life is really the snapshot of what we've seen.
Yeah, it's so much more than what we could ever imagine, right? The transformation of our lives. And I think for you, seeing the transformation physically, you went from being this, very sick individual, like physically, and to see the transformation of who you became, down the line is amazing. But there's an even greater transformation that's been happening in your heart.
Yeah.
And as a pastor, that's where I get the chance to watch this, and we get the chance to be on the sidelines and cheer you on to see the direction that you've chosen to go and who you are today. Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing what God does.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Why is being involved in the local church so important? And how is being a part of 2911, I mean, but just a local place where you can find God, be encouraged by him, grow in him, now work in the ministry of who he is.
Yeah.
Like why?
Never in a million years would I have ever told you or guessed that this is where I would be or what I would be doing with my life. And my heart and passion of getting people connected to the local church, or just 2911 church specifically, this is my position, right? Is I know the spiritual transformation of my family as a whole wouldn't have happened without the local church. I mean, we all were praying. I had my salvation experience on the patio, all those things. But the growth, the discipleship, the community, the love, the generosity, the humility that comes with being in community really is what actually fanned into flame the transformation of my family. Because for a long time, my parents living out here after living their last 40 plus years in New Mexico had zero friends, zero family, zero anything out here. So they were isolated on an island. And when they came to the church, they found friendship. They found the community that they were longing for. And that really helped my brother and I find a place of community and connection as well because of the strong young adult culture that we have. And so I understand the power of getting involved in a local church, being in community in the local church, simply by the transformation of my family.
Yeah, we feel the same way watching your family. I can say in a lot of years of ministry, 3-4 decades almost, your family's transformation has been one of the most miraculous things I've ever seen when it comes to not just the physical transformation, but the spiritual transformation and how it passes down. Your mom came on that morning watching your dad, watching you, watching your brother, your sister, just your family. And that's the beauty of being a part
It's amazing.
of the family of God.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Zak.
It's been an honor.
Ooh, I mean, it gets to the core of my heart because it's got so many unique mountaintop moments and valleys.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we can identify with the most. Maybe we aren't given a stage 4 cancer ultimatum or diagnosis, but we understand what it means to be struggling. And you were in that struggle and that fight just for life.
Yeah.
And to know that Jesus Christ came along, you opened your heart, and it just changes everything.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for your willingness to share that. And I know somebody is going to be encouraged by that.
Yeah. I sure hope so. I mean, God gave me my testimony for a reason. So
I want to remind you, Zach, your story matters. And for those that are listening, their story matters as well.
Amen.
And I just find it so cool as humans, God gives us something to share.
Right.
And even if you feel like it's small, it still matters.
Yep.
Because somebody can utilize that moment you had on the mountaintop or in the valley and see you push through, and that encourages them to do the same. Thank you. There's a plan, hope, and a future for everyone, Zach, and it's an honor to see that happening in your life.
Thank you.